We'll wait to see what the reaction is from the United States to that speech by Mujtaba Khamenei. Donald Trump has, though, said that before that speech that stopping Iran's evil empire, as he calls it, is more important than oil prices. Let's just look at the energy crisis around the world that has been prompted by this war. The threat of Iran attacking ships in the Strait of Hormuz, Mujtaba Khamenei saying that the strait must remain closed. It's one of the most important waterways for the global delivery of oil and gas. That's led to rising energy prices right across the globe. Our diplomatic correspondent, Andrew Hopkins, reports on Türkiye is planning to weather this particular storm.
This video shows what the US military says are airstrikes on Iranian ships, laying mines near the Strait of Hormuz, an indication of the high stakes at play in this waterway, through which 20% of the world's oil and gas passes through, a shipping link between Gulf Arab states and the outside world, and an issue which has prompted the Turkish president to provide reassurances.
Thanks to the investments we have made in energy supply security, the agreements we have signed and the measures we have taken, we are not facing any risks. In 2025, our domestic crude oil production increased by 26% compared to the previous year, reaching 48 million barrels. During the same period, in order to increase our source diversification, we procured oil from 15 different countries.
The start of the conflict with Iran sent oil prices rocketing to their highest since the start of the Ukraine war in 2022. They've fallen since, but mixed messages from politicians over how long the conflict will last means they still haven't stabilized. The Turkish government hopes diversifying its energy sources in recent years will help it endure the energy shortages caused by the war. 60% of energy produced in Türkiye now comes from renewable sources, such as wind, solar and hydropower.
The major turbulence in oil and natural gas markets shows that our strategy is correct, but it also indicates that we need to accelerate our efforts. We are a country with rapidly increasing energy demand. Our economy is growing, the population is increasing, and urbanization is rising.
Türkiye has also diversified into nuclear power. The first reactor at Akkuyu plant is scheduled to start working this year, with other power stations in the pipeline. It's also producing its own gas, after discovering reserves in the Black Sea in 2020. It imports gas from a wide range of countries, not only from the Gulf, and produces its own oil, following a major find in southeast Türkiye in 2023. In recent years, Türkiye has had to import 74% of its energy from abroad to satisfy demand, but now large parts don't come from what has become the world's worst trouble spot. And as the International Energy Agency talks about the biggest release of oil reserves in history to try to restrain prices, the Turkish government hopes that its policies of energy diversification will see it through the bad times. Andrew Hopkins, TRT World, Ankara.
Here in the studio with me is Esed Özdil, a non-resident fellow at the Atlantic Council. Esed, thank you so much indeed for your time. The whole world is facing the same challenge that we are now examining. Turkey's energy needs. As we see, the price of oil is going up. Let me just start with what you think of the statement that came out of Iran on Wednesday, when Iran warned the world, get ready for oil to reach $200 a barrel. Is that realistic?
It's highly possible, because the Strait of Hormuz is the home of the passage almost 20 million barrels of oil and oil products every day. And if you consider the total consumption of the globe in a day, which is 100 million barrels, we are talking about roughly 20% of the global demand. And basically, in the past crisis, we were seeing that 4 or 5 million barrels were cut from international markets, and alternative producers subsidized, and they could create alternatives to that amount. But actually, simply 20 million barrels cannot be replaceable by other sources, and it can create huge pressure on the supply side, and we cannot exactly know what's going to be the price floor, price ceiling in the future.
So, yeah, we've had in this graphic just an illustration here of the diversity of Turkey's energy supplies. And this wasn't always the case.
Yeah.
This obviously helps a lot. But while we look at this diversity, you mentioned the Strait of Hormuz. How dependent is Turkey on that strait?
Basically, Turkey has very low dependency to Strait of Hormuz because the crude oil structure, Turkey roughly imports 60% from Russia directly via Black Sea and sea passages. So basically, Strait of Hormuz has minority effect on Turkey in terms of physical supply security. When it comes to LNG side, basically Strait of Hormuz is also passing almost 20% of the global LNG supplies, basically, which is Qatar, the first or second either biggest supplier in the LNG side. However, Turkey also have very diversified LNG infrastructure, and most of the LNG that Turkey offtakes come from Nigeria, Algeria, United States, or other alternative countries. And the Qatari LNG flows to Turkey was in a very minor volumes since 2024. So that's why basically from physical supply security perspective, Turkey has very minor exposure to Strait of Hormuz right now.
We had the Turkish Energy Minister Alparslan Bayraktar saying that Turkey, following the International Energy Agency's decision, will release 11.6 million barrels of oil from its national reserves.
Yes.
So 400 million barrels will be released by members of the IEA, who are about 32 countries.
Yes.
Will that be for the whole world or just for their own territories?
The four International Energy Agency members, basically.
So they'll release their own reserves for themselves?
Yes, exactly, exactly. For the International Energy Agency members, there is a prerequisite that they need to store certain amounts of the crude as the strategic reserves. And basically this concept was created after 1970 Arab oil embargo. So it is kind of a secondary precaution for that kind of the crisis. So that's why this is the first measure that they are going to release some cells of the strategic reserves. But basically, if you ask my personal opinion, it's a panacea. No, of course, it can be a short-term relief only.
Let's just bring up that diversity again, as we see here, the Strait of Hormuz. And if there are that many ships passing through the strait, that would be surprising, because at least a dozen have been hit in the past 10 days or so.
That's true.
But let's look at the diversity graphic again. Can Turkey rely on the diversity that we are showing here compared to other countries? And I'm mentioning this because India's oil minister in the past hour or so has said his country will look at alternative sources of fuel. Does that mean coal? Because what else is there? Would Turkey have to look at alternative sources, or can it rely on this diversity alone?
We can compare the position of Turkey and India to better understand the situation. The advantage of Turkey is directly connected with the suppliers, either oil and gas.
That's a good point.
Yeah, it's oil and gas. For example, Russia is one of the biggest suppliers of oil and gas globally, and Turkey has two pipelines to import direct the gas from Russia, which is Blue Stream and Turk Stream. So basically, the bulk of the gas that Turkey imports comes directly from these pipelines. When it comes to the oil, so we cannot see here in the map, but just a little bit up, we have Novorossiysk port from Russia.
Yeah.
And from Novorossiysk port, basically, Turkey imports directly crude via its own ports, either Black Sea or passage through the Bosphorus Strait, etc. And when it comes to the natural gas, when it comes to the other alternative resources, for example, the crude oil coming from Iraq directly to Turkey, the Ceyhan bases. So the main advantage of Turkey has diversified via direct link through pipelines or LNG terminals that they can get LNG from international markets without any passage to Hormuz.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the India is highly dependent to oil imports, and bulk of the oil that India imports, roughly 5 million a day, which is coming through the Gulf countries passing through the Hormuz.
Right.
So that's why that's why India is very fragile in order to diversify. So what can be alternative resources? As Trump said that India might be allowed to import directly from oil, Russia. It's true.
Yes.
However, there are other alternatives. There are so many ways that Russian crude should go and sail to reach the Indian ports. And actually, the coal is not an easy. Also, the coal prices will go up. The only choice for India is looking to other alternative suppliers. But since you don't have contract in place, basically, it will take also time to sign the contractual basis, to get the suppliers. It's not an easy, it's not a plug and play.
Already, energy prices are going up all over the world. And citizens have been living through a cost of living crisis for quite a few years now.
Yes.
Do you see that impact on rising prices coming to Turkey as well? Are there government subsidies for households, for domestic users of energy? How is everyday living going to be affected here in Turkey?
Well, the thing is that Turkey, as other countries, is exposed to international prices.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the Brent, basically, the fuel prices are determined by the Brent price delivered in Geneva Lover port in Italy. So this is the price formulation in Turkey. For the natural gas, Turkey has two types of contracts. The one, TTF indexed, which is the exchange based in Netherlands, and another one is Brent indexation. As Brent prices goes up, as TTF prices go up, definitely the import cost of Turkey will increase. When I wrote an article roughly 10 years ago, I have calculated that every $1 increase in barrel of a crude oil has direct effect to Turkish economy annually around $350 million in terms of import bill. So that's why inevitably the import cost of Turkey will increase. Definitely the prices to end users, it can be electricity power plants, it can be factories, and it can be the household, will be affected. However, Turkish government has allocated almost 500 billion Turkish liras as subsidization budget from the state incomes. However, this amount, I'm sure that will be fully used. However, if some other measures should have been taken, then Turkish government will act.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's subsidized at the moment. When I see my monthly gas bill, I see the total, but it's not the same I'm being asked to pay.
Exactly.
And because I don't speak very good Turkish, I'm struggling to understand what the equation is, but I'm pretty sure that's part of the government subsidy for every household.
Yes, it's written on the bottom that this part of the bill will be covered by the Turkish state, yeah?
Right, okay. Let's broaden it out again. 400 million barrels being released by 32 countries. And you just said that the world uses 100 million barrels a day.
Yes, exactly.
So 4 days worth of release. What difference is that going to make? The prices are still going up. Oh, we're running out of time. You've got about 30 seconds, Esed.
Okay, the thing is that what I am trying to understand, the international markets are very volatile. The prices are going up and down. So my understanding is that International Energy Agency and the Western governments led by the United States are trying to do their best to calm down the tension of the markets, and this is just one part of this approach.
Brief. Thank you so much. Esed, really, really interesting analysis, and something that is not, as I said at the beginning, not just affecting Turkey, but the whole world, and we're an international news channel.
Exactly.
This is instructive for all of our viewers. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Adnan, for the invitation.
Thanks. We'll be back in a few minutes with the latest at the top of the hour. It'll be 1400 GMT. Bye-bye for the moment.
An old rivalry, a new threshold. No more proxies. Strikes, counter-strikes, missiles crossing borders, drones over cities. The United States, Israel, Iran. Official targets, military infrastructure. But the consequences may not be contained. Civilians in the crossfire, families in shelters, a region in flames, energy routes, global markets, all exposed. Diplomacy is active, but leverage is limited. Deterrence or escalation, precision or miscalculation, short campaign or open-ended conflict. No borders for the fallout. Middle East on edge. Continuous coverage on TRT World.